June 6, 1944. Before the sun rises over Normandy, the night sky tears itself open. Aircraft roar low, flak explodes, and paratroopers scatter across fields meant for cattle, not combat. Somewhere outside the village of Angoville-au-Plain, a young American medic slams into a muddy field, his parachute tangled, his landing rough. Gunfire snaps in every direction. Kenneth does not pause to find his unit or orient himself. He runs toward the noise toward a village already being swallowed by violence. What he cannot yet know is that within hours, this quiet Norman hamlet will become one of the strangest moral battlegrounds of the entire war. Inside Angoville-au-Plain, another medic has already found shelter. Robert Wright steps into the village church, its stone walls heavy with centuries of prayer. A red cross is clearly marked on the building, a symbol meant to signal protection under the laws of war. But symbols are fragile things on D-Day. When Moore bursts through the church doors, breathless and soaked in mud, the two men exchange names. Barely more than that before the first wounded are dragged inside. There is no time to plan, no time to think, only time to act. And as the cries begin to echo off the stone walls, one question hangs unspoken in the air. How long before the sanctuary is discovered and destroyed? The church has almost nothing to offer them. No supply crates, no stretchers, no morphine to spare. Just medic bags, pocket first aid kits, and their own hands. Outside, German forces push into the village, turning hedgerows and farmhouses into killing grounds. The fighting is close, chaotic, and personal. Bullets punch into stone, shrapnel screams past the church doors. Inside, wounded men American paratroopers pile onto pews and the floor, their blood soaking into wood polished by generations of worshippers. Moore and Wright move nonstop, tearing fabric, packing wounds, whispering reassurance they are not sure they believe themselves. Moore cannot stay inside. Every instinct tells him the wounded outside will die if he does. He steps back into the open wearing nothing but a helmet and armband marked with a red cross. He finds an old wooden wheelbarrow and pushes it toward the road straight into gunfire. A German soldier spots him. The rifle comes up. The finger tightens. Then the red cross comes into view. The rifle lowers. A voice calls out, not in anger, but recognition, medic, medic. In that instant, a line is drawn not on a map, but in conscience, and it could vanish at any second. Again and again, Moore runs the gauntlet. He gathers help from paratroopers of the 101st Airborne, loads wounded into the wheelbarrow, and races back to the church. Territory shifts by the hour. A road safe in the morning becomes lethal by afternoon. Each trip could be his last. Each return feels borrowed. Inside, Wright keeps working, hands slick with blood, mind locked on the next patient. Neither man carries a weapon, neither man fires a shot. Yet death circles them relentlessly, waiting for a mistake. By midday, the church is no longer just a first aid post. It is a magnet drawing the wounded, the dying, and the desperate from every corner of the village. Outside, the battle shows no sign of slowing. Inside, the pews disappear beneath bodies. And then, as Moore staggers back through the doors with another casualty, the room falls into a sudden, dangerous silence because this time, the uniform is not American. If you're finding this story gripping so far, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It's a small action, but it helps stories like this reach more people's stories that remind us what humanity can look like even at its darkest hour. The decision Moore and Wright make next will redefine everything that happens in this church. It will determine whether Angoville-au-Plain becomes a massacre or something far rarer in war. And once that choice is made, there will be no turning back. The wounded man Moore has carried into the church is German. His uniform is unmistakable. For a brief, razor-edged moment, no one speaks. The sounds of battle outside feel closer now, louder, as if the walls themselves are listening. American paratroopers glance at one another. Some stiffen, others look away. This is D-Day. Men have watched friends die only hours earlier. And now, here lies the enemy, bleeding onto a church floor already soaked red. What happens next will either shatter the fragile calm inside these walls or define it forever. Moore does not hesitate. He lowers the German soldier onto a pew and immediately goes to work, cutting fabric, packing wounds, slowing the bleeding. Wright joins him without a word. There is no speech about morality, no explanation offered to the room. Their actions speak for them. The German soldier groans, frightened, young. Later, Moore will explain the decision with disarming simplicity. They were young men, just like us, only wearing different uniforms. In that moment, nationality dissolves under the weight of shared vulnerability. Not long after, another wounded German is brought in, then another. The church becomes something unprecedented on the Normandy front, a place where enemies lie side by side, tended by the same hands. The tension is unbearable, stretched thin as wire, and then the door slams open. A German soldier stands silhouetted in the doorway, weapon raised. No one moves, no one breathes. His eyes scan the room and land on the wounded Germans inside. Slowly, almost reverently, he lowers his rifle, makes the sign of the cross, and backs away. Only when the door closes does Wright realize he's been holding his breath. Understanding how easily this balance could collapse, Wright makes a decision that will shape everything that follows. No weapons inside the church, none. Rifles are piled at the doorway, American and German alike. The rule is absolute. Inside these walls, there will be no killing. It is a gamble as bold as it is dangerous. If either side ignores it, the medics will be helpless, but the rule holds for now. As night falls, the situation worsens, the wounded continue to arrive, and supplies grow thinner. Outside, orders come down the line. The 101st Airborne must pull back. The position is untenable. When the command reaches the church, Moore and Wright are faced with an impossible choice. The wounded cannot be moved. Leaving them behind would be a death sentence. Staying means disobeying orders, possibly facing court-martial, or worse, capture. When the unit withdraws, the two medics remain behind, alone with dozens of wounded men and no protection except a Red Cross and a promise. By dawn, German forces retake the village. Armed soldiers enter the church. Moore and Wright brace themselves for the end. Instead, the Germans begin bringing in their own wounded. The sanctuary fills beyond capacity. Men lie shoulder to shoulder on the floor. Those closest to death are placed nearest the altar, as if proximity to something sacred might still matter. Outside, artillery pounds the countryside. Inside, whispers replace shouts. Pain is universal, fear is shared. Hours pass, then footsteps echo again at the church door, this time heavier, more deliberate. A German officer enters, surveying the scene. He listens as the medics explain the rules, the wounded, the shortage of supplies. When Wright tells him no weapons are allowed, the officer pauses. Then, slowly, he removes his own weapon and sets it aside. He thanks them. He asks what they need. Supplies, Wright answers. And a doctor, the officer nods. He promises to return within 24 hours. Hands are shaken, an unspoken truce is sealed. But truces in war are fragile things. Outside, engines grow louder, artillery shifts. Somewhere beyond the hedgerows, American forces are coming back, and when they do, the church will sit directly in the path of destruction once more. The truce holds just long enough to feel real. Inside the church at Angoville-au-Plain, time seems suspended. The wounded breathe, groan, pray, and wait. Moore and Wright move among them like shadows, conserving energy, rationing supplies, measuring every bandage as if it were gold. Outside, the village belongs to the Germans for now. But both medics know this quiet is temporary. In Normandy, control lasts only until the next barrage. And when the battle returns, the church will stand directly in its path. True to his word, the German officer returns, supplies arrive, a doctor follows. For a moment, just a moment, the impossible seems possible. Cooperation in the middle of invasion. The medics accept the help without ceremony. There is no celebration, only relief. Men who would otherwise die now have a chance. It is a fragile victory, built on mutual restraint and the unspoken agreement that this place, at least, will remain human. By midday, the war comes crashing back. American forces, the Screaming Eagles of the 101st Airborne, push toward the village again. Mortar fall, machine guns rattle, the church trembles as explosions march closer. Yet something astonishing happens in the chaos. Whenever Moore or Wright step outside, the firing slows. Shouts carry across the smoke, "Medic, hold your fire." For seconds at a time, bullets pause. It is not peace, but it is restraint. And in war, that difference is everything. Then catastrophe nearly strikes. A mortar shell crashes through the church roof and slams onto the stone floor. It skids across the blood-slicked tiles, rolling to a stop among the wounded. Time freezes. A single detonation would kill everyone inside. It does not explode. By sheer, impossible luck, the fuse fails. Wright does not hesitate. He grabs the live shell, hauls it up, and throws it back outside just as bullets tear through the windows, spraying glass across the room. Men scream. Miraculously, no one dies, but the message is clear. The sanctuary is no longer invisible. An American Sherman tank begins firing dangerously close to the church. Each blast shakes the walls. Wright sprints outside, waving his arms, screaming for the tank to stop. He is certain he will be shot by someone. Instead, he finds another paratrooper already intervening, risking his life to protect the wounded inside. The line of humanity, thin as it is, still holds. Soon after, an American lieutenant arrives with a new demand. He wants to use the church steeple as an observation post. From there, American forces could dominate the village. It is a sound tactical decision. Moore refuses immediately. The lieutenant pulls rank. Wright steps forward. If the steeple is used, the church becomes a military target. The wounded inside will die. This building, Wright insists, will remain a sanctuary or it will cease to exist. The standoff hangs in the air. Finally, the lieutenant relents. The church remains unarmed. If this story is moving you, now is a great moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps these real, human stories of history reach more people, stories that rarely make it into textbooks, but matter just as much as any battle plan. By nightfall, Moore and Wright are beyond exhaustion. They have been awake for nearly 3 days. More than 80 wounded men have passed through their hands, American and German alike, only to have died outside. The sounds of battle begin to fade, drifting farther down the Norman roads. The medics do not celebrate. They simply keep working until there is no one left to save. But as the guns finally fall silent, another question emerges, one that will echo long after the war ends. How will this moment be remembered, and will anyone believe what happened inside these walls? When the fighting finally moves on, it does so without ceremony. One moment the church at Angoville-au-Plain trembles under distant fire. The next, the sounds recede, leaving behind a silence almost as heavy as the battle itself. Moore and Wright stand amid the aftermath, exhausted beyond language. For 3 days and 2 nights, they have treated more than 80 wounded soldiers, Americans, Germans, enemies who, inside these walls, were simply men trying not to die. All but to survive. In the arithmetic of war, that number is nothing short of miraculous, and it hangs over the church like a quiet, unanswered prayer. The village is liberated again. Units move on. Orders resume. The machinery of war grinds forward, indifferent to what briefly existed here. Moore and Wright do not give interviews. They do not frame their actions as heroic. They return to duty, then eventually to civilian life, carrying with the memories few around them can fully understand. What happened in Angoville-au-Plain does not fit easily into the dominant stories of World War II, stories of momentum, strategy, and victory. This was something smaller, more fragile, and perhaps more difficult to explain. Years pass, the church remains standing, and slowly, people begin to remember. Not because of grand monuments or official proclamations, but because the physical scars refuse to disappear. Bloodstains still mark the wooden pews. A cracked tile on the floor shows where the unexploded mortar came to rest, a silent witness to how close annihilation came. The walls bear pockmarks where bullets tore through stone. The building itself becomes an archive, preserving evidence that no written report ever fully captured. A monument is raised outside, honoring the medics. Stained glass windows are installed, depicting the liberation and the Red Cross that shielded so many lives. Visitors arrive, drawn not by spectacle, but by the unsettling power of the place. Standing inside, it is impossible not to imagine the wounded lying where tourists now walk, or to hear, faintly, the echoes of whispered prayers in multiple languages. And in that stillness, another question emerges: how many other moments like this were lost to history, unnoticed because they did not involve conquest? Robert Wright carries Angoville-au-Plain with him until the end of his life. He wishes to be buried there, and the churchyard he defended with nothing but conviction and courage. Bureaucracy says no, regulations intervene. Even in death, the system proves inflexible, but the story does not end there. Some of Wright's ashes are quietly brought to the village and buried anyway. A simple plaque marked REW rests in the soil. It is understated, it feels appropriate. Kenneth Moore lives long enough to see the recognition grow. He returns to the church. He stands where he once worked without sleep, surrounded by the wounded. He does not speak much. He does not need to. The building says enough. In a war defined by total mobilization and total destruction, Moore and Wright demonstrated something radically different, that even under the most extreme conditions, individual choice still matters. On one of the bloodiest days in human history, in a village most maps barely mark, two unarmed men refused to let hatred dictate their actions. They did not stop the war. They did not change its outcome. But for 3 days in June 1944, they proved that humanity could still hold the line if only someone was willing to stand there and defend it.